Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Today, we're diving into a case that really chills me to the bone.
Ooh, okay. I'm ready.
All right, so we're headed to Clyde, Ohio, a town that had its sense of peace absolutely shattered back in 2015.
I've heard about this one.
Yeah, so imagine this, a place where everybody knows your name, doors are left unlocked, that kind of like idyllic small-town America.
Yeah, like out of a movie or something.
Exactly. And then suddenly a brutal, unsolved murder rocks the community to its core.
Wow. It's quite a contrast.
Right. It's like this darkness creeping into a place where it seemingly had no right to be. I've been poring over all the sources we have. And honestly, the more I learned about Clyde, the more unsettling this case becomes.
I can see why. It really makes you question those assumptions about safety and security, right?
Totally.
You have this picture of Clyde as like a haven, a place where serious crime is practically non-existent. And then you're confronted with a crime so vicious, so calculated, it just seems to defy everything you thought you knew about the town.
Absolutely. It's like a complete 180. So let's start by setting the scene. What can you tell us about Clyde before this horrific crime took place?
Well, Clyde is like your quintessential small town.
Okay.
A population just over 6,000, strong community ties, low crime rate. A lot of folks have lived there for generations. And the Whirlpool plant was, and still is, the heart of the local economy.
It's interesting, when I think of small towns with one major employer, I often wonder about the unique vulnerabilities that might create.
Yeah.
Is there a sense that, like, the community's fate is tied to this one company? And could that play a role in a case like this?
That's a really astute observation. You're right. When an entire town's identity and economic well-being are so intertwined with a single industry, any disruption, whether it's a crime or an economic downturn, it can have like a really disproportionate impact.
Oh, for sure.
It's like the town's sense of security is intrinsically linked to the stability of that one plant.
Right.
And when something like this murder happens, it's not just a crime. It's like a blow to the very core of their existence.
Totally. Yeah. Like their whole world is kind of shaken up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we have this seemingly idyllic town built around a single industry. And then on April 10th, 2015, everything changes. Walk us through what we know about the disappearance and the discovery of the victim.
All right, so it starts with a missing person report. Seemingly routine at first.
Okay.
These kinds of reports are not unheard of in small towns. People go off on trips. Sometimes they lose touch for a while.
Sure, yeah.
But then the missing individual's car is found at an apartment complex. And in the trunk, they discover a body.
Oh, wow, in the trunk. Okay, that immediately sends chills down my spine.
Yeah.
It's clearly not a simple disappearance anymore.
Exactly. And the details, they get even more disturbing. The victim was bound, and there were signs of a severe beating. This wasn't just a murder. It was brutal. It was a premeditated act.
And to make matters even more mysterious, our sources say the victim's name was never released publicly.
That's right. Now, that could be for a number of reasons, perhaps to protect the victim's family, or as part of like a specific investigative strategy, but it certainly adds another layer of intrigue to this already baffling case.
It really does. So we have a small town, a brutal murder, and a whole lot of unknowns. What was the immediate reaction in Clyde? How did the community cope with this sudden burst of violence in their midst?
Well, imagine living in a place where serious crime is practically a foreign concept, right?
Yeah.
And then this happens. The shock, it was palpable. Our sources describe a community gripped by fear and disbelief. It's as though their bubble of safety was burst, and they were suddenly exposed to a harsh reality they never thought possible.
That makes sense. It's not just the crime itself, it's like the shattering of their perception of safety. The realization that even in a place like Clyde, something like this could happen.
Precisely. And from an investigative standpoint, this case presented some unique challenges. Clyde's police force, accustomed to dealing with minor offenses, was simply not equipped to handle a homicide of this magnitude. They needed help, and fast.
So what happened next? Did they call in outside agencies? Were there any leads? Any breakthroughs in the investigation?
Yes. State and regional agencies were brought in immediately to assist. You're talking forensic teams, seasoned detectives, the whole works. They combed through the crime scene meticulously, interviewed residents, retraced the victim's steps. I mean, they really threw everything they had at this case. But despite their best efforts, they seem to hit a
A
wall.
wall, what do you mean?
The sources highlight this frustrating lack of leads in the initial stages of the investigation. No witnesses, no signs of forced entry at any potential crime scenes, no apparent motive, and a victim whose identity remains a secret. It's like the perpetrator vanished into thin air.
Man, that's got to be incredibly frustrating for both the investigators and the community. All those unanswered questions just
Yeah.
hanging in the air, fueling speculation and fear.
Absolutely. When there's a void of information, it's human nature to try and fill it. And often that leads to, rampant speculation.
Oh, yeah.
And in a small town like Clyde, where everyone knows everyone, the rumor mill can be especially potent.
So what were some of the theories floating around back then? Was it like random violence, a personal grudge, or something even more sinister? What were people saying?
All those possibilities were certainly on the table.
Yeah.
The fact that the car was found at an apartment complex led to some speculation that, someone living there might have been involved. However, no connections were ever publicly confirmed.
Mm,
And that just added fuel to the fire.
right, right. You mentioned earlier that Clyde's economy is largely dependent on the Whirlpool plant.
Mhm.
Did any theories kind of connect back to the plant or the town's economic situation?
That's a great question, and one that investigators surely considered.
Hmm.
When you have a single industry dominating a town's livelihood, any number of scenarios could arise. Was there some, disgruntled employee seeking revenge? Was the victim involved in something related to the plant that made them a target?
Right.
These were all avenues that would have been explored, but again, nothing concrete ever emerged.
It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing.
Yeah.
And all the while, the town is left to grapple with the fallout. This crime must have had a lasting impact on Clyde, even beyond the immediate fear and shock.
Without a doubt. You see this case, it chipped away at the town's sense of identity. They're very understanding of themselves.
Mm.
Before the murder, Clyde was a place where people felt safe,
Hmm.
where they didn't have to worry about locking their doors or looking over their shoulders. Afterwards, that sense of security was gone, replaced by this lingering unease.
It's almost like a collective trauma, isn't it?
Mm.
This event ripped apart the fabric of their community and, leaving them to try and stitch it back together while still carrying the scars.
Yeah.
How have they managed to cope in the years since the murder?
It hasn't been easy, that's for sure. But Clyde is a resilient community. They've taken steps to reclaim their sense of safety, though the shadow of that unsolved murder undoubtedly remains.
So what kind of steps are we talking about? Did they make changes to their law enforcement?
They did. Our sources mention increased training for officers, more resources allocated to crime prevention,
Okay.
and even greater collaboration with regional agencies.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they realized they couldn't rely solely on their small town status for protection anymore.
That's a sad but necessary realization, I suppose.
All right.
And what about the residents themselves? How have they adapted?
Well, there's a heightened sense of vigilance now.
Okay.
People are more cautious, more likely to lock their doors, report suspicious activity, just be more aware of their surroundings. There's also a stronger emphasis on community watch programs, neighbors looking out for each other.
It sounds like that close-knit community spirit, which was always a hallmark of Clyde, actually helped them in the aftermath of the tragedy.
Yeah.
It's like they leaned on each other for support and strength.
Absolutely. In a way, the crime forced them to come together even more closely. But it's not just about practical measures. It's also about remembering the victim and keeping hope alive.
I'm intrigued. What do you mean by remembering the victim, especially since their identity was never made public?
Well, every year, Clyde holds vigils to honor the victim's memory.
Oh, wow.
It's a way for the community to come together, to grieve, to show that they haven't forgotten. It's also a powerful symbol of their determination to find answers, to get justice for the victim, even if their name remains unknown.
It's really touching. It shows that even in the face of such a horrific event, the human spirit can find ways to heal, to persevere.
It speaks to that enduring hope for justice,
Mm-hmm.
For closure, even in the face of a seemingly insurmountable mystery. Yeah.
Communities like Clyde, they refuse to let the darkness win. They keep the memory of the victim alive, not just as a reminder of the tragedy, but as a beacon of hope that someday the truth will be revealed.
It's, it's cases like this that really stay with you. The
Yeah.
mystery, the unanswered questions, the impact on a community that thought it was immune to such violence, it all just gets under your skin.
It's true. This case in Clyde, It serves as a stark reminder that no place is truly immune to darkness. And the fact that it remains unsolved only adds to its haunting nature.
Right.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces, a story without an ending.
And I think it's those missing pieces, those unanswered questions that keep people coming back to this case, trying to make sense of it all. What do you think draws us to these unsolved mysteries?
I think the human mind craves closure. And when we're denied that, when we're left with unanswered questions, it can be incredibly unsettling. We want to know who did it, why they did it,
Yeah.
and whether they'll ever be brought to justice.
Yeah.
It's a natural human instinct.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by true crime, and I think part of it is that desire to understand the darker side of human nature. But it's important to remember that behind every case file, every headline, there are real people whose lives have been irrevocably altered.
Absolutely. We can get so caught up in the mystery, the intrigue, that we forget about the human cost. The victim in this case, whose name remains unknown to the public, was someone's child, perhaps a sibling, a friend. Their absence leaves a void that can never truly be filled.
And that's why cases like this are so important to remember. We need to keep talking about them, keep searching for answers, not just for the sake of justice, but also to honor the memory of the victims, to acknowledge that their lives mattered.
Precisely. Every victim deserves to have their story told, their memory kept alive. And every community that has been touched by such tragedy deserves the chance to heal and to find some measure of peace.
Well said. As we wrap up our deep dive into Clyde, Ohio, I want to pose a question to you and our listeners. What theories do you have about this case? What details stood out to you the most? Maybe by sharing our thoughts and perspectives, we can shed some new light on this enduring mystery.
I would love to hear what our listeners think. Sometimes a fresh perspective, a new interpretation of the facts, it's all it takes to crack a case wide open.
And that's what the deep dive is all about. Exploring the complexities of real-life mysteries, engaging in thoughtful discussion, and maybe, just maybe, uncovering some hidden truths along the way. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating deep dives. Until next time, stay curious.